If you've been following me for a while on here, then you will already know that I have a huge disdain for approximately 90% of the entirety of MCU. A few notable exceptions. I'd say one film every 2-3 years is decent at the very least. More notable exceptions are like the beginnings of the MCU, the very first Iron Man. I enjoyed the second Iron Man, though it was nowhere anything compared to the first one. I even enjoyed the third Iron Man. I thought there was just always a lot of constant character development and character buildup in every single one of those films. Honestly, for the MCU, to me, the heyday was around the Winter Soldier era. Now, there are some good gems after the Winter Soldier. Civil War was alright. It was kind of like a mini Infinity War, a mini Avengers film, but it wasn't Avengers. As far as the Avengers go, the first one is tediously slow and boring. Kind of had lazy writing. Age of Ultron was just garbage. And then Avengers Infinity War was actually a really strong third film in the Avengers trilogy, with a downfall in Endgame, which Avengers Endgame was just complete garbage. It was only made just for happy endings, and I get that there's some continuity in the plotting in Endgame that was able to progress the MCU even to now, which we'll get into that later, but the majority of the MCU I hate, as a long story short. Now, the past year, I did like a couple MCU films, the notable ones being Shang-Chi. I was actually pleasantly surprised in the storytelling and the plotting of that. Standard story, but it looked great, and it was told very well. The new Spider-Man No Way Home, although I'm honestly kind of biased for Spider-Man, because when it comes to Marvel, Spider-Man's actually my favorite, but every single one is at least well made at the very least. And then we had pieces of crap like Black Widow, which had a one-note misogynistic villain, and the only credit I will give Black Widow for a positive is the intro credit sequence was a 10 out of 10. Everything else in Black Widow was just garbage. It was all just garbage. So I enjoyed No Way Home. I thought that going into the multiverse and exploring all of the different universes and everything, I thought that they did a pretty good job in No Way Home. Now, fast forward a couple months into the current time period, we finally get the sequel of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is basically Spider-Man No Way Home come again, but the main character being Doctor Strange instead of being a supporting character. So basically, Doctor Strange 2 is essentially Spider-Man No Way Home, but they replace Spider-Man with Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange 2 was directed by Sam Raimi, who has a history of horror films such as The Evil Dead, the originals, and he also directed, and I believe he also wrote and directed the very first original Spider-Man trilogy. And now he comes on board to direct Doctor Strange 2. And as far as the direction and the director for Doctor Strange 2, two thumbs completely way up. The direction is completely excellent. Just everything about Doctor Strange 2 just keeps progressing through the story. There are actually a lot of notable cameos in this, but not many or enough to where it's over-bloated. It's honestly, everything about Doctor Strange is nice and cleanly well made. The visuals has a perfect blend between CGI and practical effects, so much so that I will literally praise Doctor Strange 2 as being the absolute greatest, most beautiful looking film that I have ever watched. There was not a single shot in this film that looked fake to me, like it was in front of a green screen. I even can say that about a couple sequences in the first Avatar film, which Avatar was always boasted as the greatest, most beautiful looking film ever. I spotted those sequences as being fake back when it released and I got it on Blu-ray. Maybe it was just because at the time Blu-ray was so powerful, but I caught that. In Doctor Strange 2, in theaters at least, I did not see a single shot that looked faulty or messed up or anything. The visuals and everything for its looks are perfect. And with that comes the direction from Sam Raimi, which he blends action and horror into this film, and he does it excellently. Honestly, Doctor Strange 2, they could not have picked a better, more perfect director to helm the filmmaking of Doctor Strange 2. I have a couple minor gripes with extremely subtle and minor cliche points in the story, but everything outside of those couple little scenes, and I mean they're like 5 seconds each scene, it's only like 1 or 2. Outside of those scenes, even in the scenes, the scenes look beautiful. So I mean, I looked past the very small, minute gripes I had with this film, because overall this film is absolutely magnificent. It was extremely well made, extremely well written. It has a lot of self-awareness to it, and the cameos are great. Benedict Cumberbatch was actually excellent as Doctor Strange this time, as was Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda and the Scarlet Witch. And as far as the story goes, the story is actually excellent within the film itself, and that's very rare for me to say nowadays about an MCU film, but it is a fact. Doctor Strange 2's story is extremely well done. In that, I mean, the main villains in this film is a girl, and I'm trying not to spoil much, but I never watched any of the trailers, so I don't know if the trailers already spoiled stuff, but I'm trying to be as spoiler-free as possible. But the main villain being a girl who's basically hunting down a girl that Doctor Strange has to basically be a party with, in association with throughout the film. It's kind of like a less graphic Logan. It's very maturely made. The writing is very stellar. The direction keeps it flowing nice and smooth. Another thing that I can say, I wouldn't say it's a gripe because it is another superhero film, but with the director being Sam Raimi, the first 10 to 15 minutes, the way that it was written and then directed into the film, it kind of felt like they were trying to make this a Spider-Man film. Like, it started out in a dream sequence and it turned into a nightmare, and that's fine. And then Doctor Strange wakes up and then attends a wedding, and then he's cheered and praised, and that because this is post Avengers Endgame, everybody's back after 5 years, and this is basically his continuing path after the events of the stones dissolving half of the population. But at the beginning, every time he went out in public, he always got cheers and praised for being the hero, and then something bad would happen, and they kind of filmed it like he was like Spider-Man. Like, he sensed something happening from far away, and then he went and he started flying with his cape and everything, and turned into Doctor Strange, and then that turned into the action sequences with a couple monsters, and the way that they filmed it just felt so eerily like a Spider-Man film. I wouldn't really say it's a gripe because this is a superhero film. I will say, though, I feel like Sam Raimi was a little confused at the very beginning of the filming of this film. Overall, though, Sam Raimi also brings in his horror aesthetics that blend well with the story and even with the humor. There's not a lot of humor, and a lot of the time the humor is very subtle. There are some jokes where they're dry as hell, and then some jokes that are just really vivid. And with Sam Raimi's signature horror aesthetic comes imagery. And the imagery in this film, while it's not very frequent, but when there's, say, a graphic image, it looks magnificent. And overall, this whole entire film just looks amazing, as I said as a preface. But overall, for me, Doctor Strange 2 is 100% an excellent film. And I do fully mean that. For me, Doctor Strange 2 is a 10 out of 10. For once, MCU made a damn great film. I gave No Way Home an 8 out of 10. Doctor Strange 2 kind of continued on the path of multiverses and everything, but they perfected it in this with the humor and the horror aesthetics. It's just, I praise Sam Raimi as the director for this film. They seriously could not have picked a better, finer director to direct Doctor Strange 2. So again, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, for me, is a 10 out of 10. Thank you.